I'm Haley B. Miller, and this is Ohio Politics Explained, a podcast where you give us 15 minutes and we give you all the news you need to sound smart and impress your friends. Welcome to a special episode of Ohio Politics Explained. Today, we're digging into Ohio's death penalty. Executions have been in limbo since Governor Mike DeWine took office. But what happens when a new governor takes over in 2027? And what, if anything, will change before that? I spent months working with Stephanie Warsmith of the Akron Beacon Journal to answer these questions and examine other key issues around the death penalty. Welcome to your Oak debut, Stephanie.
I'm happy to be here. I've been interested in the death penalty since I was in high school and became fascinated with serial killer Ted Bundy.
Yeah, I think there's definitely a lot of interesting material here, and let's dive right in. A quick history lesson for those who are unfamiliar or don't remember where Ohio is at. DeWine halted executions because of problems accessing lethal injection drugs. Then he began to question whether the death penalty is truly a deterrent for crime. Last year, he said Ohio won't execute anyone while he's still in office. This has been difficult and frustrating to some of the family members of victims. That includes Paula Lazari, whose brother was brutally killed in Trumbull County 40 years ago.
You almost get to a point where when they schedule a date or say, oh, it looks like this is going to happen, you don't believe it's going to happen. I mean, you don't pencil it in your calendar. You don't think that's really going to take place because it's been 40 years. So why would you think it's actually going to happen?
There are some efforts by pro-death penalty Republicans to get things moving again. Stephanie, walk us through that.
So Attorney General Dave Yost has asked the federal government for access to the drugs Ohio needs to perform lethal injections. And Yost supports legislation that would add nitrogen hypoxia as another execution method. It's unclear, though, if there's enough support for this legislation, which has so far only gotten sponsor testimony in the Ohio House.
Right. And a little bit of context on Yost's request. President Donald Trump earlier this year ordered the Department of Justice to help out states that have the death penalty in place but are having trouble getting access to these drugs. The Trump administration really wants to see the death penalty be more enforced at the federal level. And we've seen a lot of other Republican states like Florida really driving a resurgence in executions nationwide, all while Ohio has this moratorium in place. And it also came up when Charlie Kirk was assassinated. The state of Utah is now pursuing the death penalty against the man accused of killing him. And back in Ohio, we've heard a little, but not much, from the candidates running for governor on this issue. Republican Vivek Ramaswamy supports the death penalty in the most egregious cases when someone is definitely guilty. He told Cleveland.com he doesn't want to change the status quo, but hasn't said if or when he'd resume executions. What about Amy Acton?
Acton, the only Democrat currently in the race, applauded DeWine's moratorium. She said she would maintain it until lawmakers, quote, solve the myriad of problems that have haunted Ohio's current system for years, end quote.
And there are people out there who want to repeal the death penalty, and it's a bipartisan position. Opponents say it's too expensive and believe the law is applied unevenly. Most of Ohio's death penalty cases are from urban counties, especially Cuyahoga and Hamilton, and a disproportionate number of people on death row are Black. The harshest critics are probably the inmates on death row. Here's Robert Bethel, who was sentenced to death in 2003 for killing an 18 and 14-year-old.
You can't really say that we are the so-called worst of the worst. You can't say that. There are guys right now walking the population, I guarantee they have worse cases than guys on death row. I guarantee it. And I've seen guys that got very light sentences with worse cases than what we've had when they cooperate. And that's another element to it.
What are some of the arguments for keeping the death penalty in place and resuming executions?
So death penalty proponents argue it's needed for the, quote, worst of the worst cases. Dave Yost, for example, asked what would happen if a person was sentenced to life in prison for a murder and then killed someone else, maybe a guard or another prison employee. Without the death penalty, Yost said, the worst that person could get would be another life sentence.
And I think for opponents of the death penalty, a total repeal is best case scenario. But Ohio has made some changes to address their concerns. The biggest was a 2021 law that allows people to claim they have a serious mental illness and shouldn't be executed. We're seeing this play out in real time in Hamilton County with the case of Rodney Hinton Jr., who was charged this year with intentionally driving into a sheriff's deputy and killing him. How else have we seen this law play out?
Well, here in Summit County, Ashford Thompson, who was convicted of killing a Twinsburg police officer, has been found by doctors hired by both prosecutors and defense attorneys to have a serious mental illness. Thompson, though, in an interesting twist, asked to withdraw his appeal, and his attorneys requested that he be evaluated to determine if he is competent to make this decision. Issues of competency have come up in several mental illness appeals across Ohio.
What are the pros and cons of the SMI law? What are some of the things that have come up in the debate about it when it was passed and in the years since?
So I think that the people who supported this change in Ohio basically said that it was a natural extension of other exemptions that have been made to Ohio's death penalty. Like, for example, you can't execute a juvenile in Ohio. You can't execute someone who's been found to have an intellectual disability in Ohio. So the SMI law was kind of the next natural step for them to take. But opponents of SMI, like the Ohio Prosecuting Attorneys Association, say that this is just another delay in carrying out executions in a system where you already have lots of appeals in place.
And for what it's worth, Ohio is one of the only states that has done this. I believe we were the first state to do this. And since then, only Kentucky has followed suit with a similar, not quite the same law. So Ohio really kind of set a precedent in this area. So this is a heavy, lofty topic, and we could probably spend an hour on here talking about it. If you want to dive in further, and we hope you do, you can read our Death Delayed series on any Gannett, Ohio website. There's also an online database that you can explore, outlining who's on death row and why they ended up there.